So, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, ambassadors, also dear friends of the Bruno Kreisky Forum. As usual, and if the weather is bad, we are particularly happy that you're here. And because we always think that we have the better news than the ones you get in front of your TV back home. So welcome. I'm particularly pleased and we are honored to have here Dr. Ebtesam El-Ketbi from the United Arab Emirates, founder and head of the think tank, the Emirates Policy Center. And so thank you for being here with us. Dr. El-Ketbi is a regular guest, I should say, in Austria and very familiar also with our debate. So welcome, Dr. El-Ketbi. Welcome also to Dr. Abdulaziz from Saudi Arabia. He also is the founder and chair of the Gulf Research Center, also a very important think tank. He very much is familiar with, of course, not only the region, but also with Europe and further on, a lot of mediation efforts. We are particularly happy to have him here. The Gulf Research Center is also a partner in a number of EU-related projects. So thank you for being with us today. Very well-known journalist and book author, Mr. Barak Ravid. Hello, Barak, joins us today online. Thank you for your efforts. You're also very busy, so thank you for being with us this evening. Our curator and moderator, Gudrun, as usual, will lead through this evening with all her expertise. And let me say at the very beginning that, first of all, as I try to underline, for us as the Bruno Kreisky Forum, it is indeed very important and to have, of course, all the guests, but also to have representatives of two think tanks from the regions. Also, Barak Ravid, of course, works with think tanks, because I do believe that this kind of cooperation is important, that we understand and better understand the positions and the perspectives from the region, that we understand that there are, of course, a lot of efforts taken a lot of efforts done in terms of research, in terms of formulating perspectives, policy advice and recommendations, which we unfortunately very often never have access to. So in having representatives of think tanks here is, of course, important. It's also important in relation to our topic. And of course, Gudrun will explain in a minute when we started to, let's say, to design this event and think about the anniversary, so to speak, of the Abraham Accords. These were still a bit different times, and therefore the question of what have these Abraham Accords, namely between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, served in the region for trust building, for further economic and scientific networks. Of course, this very important topic has been challenged, overshadowed also by the war, by the events we have seen in the last 2 years. Of course, there is still, therefore, we are happy to have Dr. Saga here. There's still Saudi Arabia. The question we also put in this invitation: what effect? What would have been the future of the Abraham Accords in relation to Saudi Arabia, but now in particular when we have this situation. So to make a long story short, there is a before and after Gaza when it comes to the Abraham Accords, and there are so many issues related to it, so I'm sure you will have a very interesting and an inspiring and hopefully good evening in terms of perspectives, what is happening in the region, and I wish you a good discussion. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished guests in Vienna and outside, also welcome from my part. I welcome you to a discussion with the title, as you well know, From Hope to Uncertainty, 5 years after the signing of the Abraham Accords between Israel and 4 Arab states. And Sabine already said it, when we started planning the event, we had one working assumption: the upcoming 5-year anniversary of the signing of the Abraham Accords in autumn in the midst of a terrible Gaza war. There was no ceasefire in sight or any realistic hope to make warring parties and regional countries agree on a plan for a post-war Gaza. Naturally, most publications on the Abraham Accords, which were published during the last months or weeks, are not up to date to this, in this respect, and it's, unavoidable, because today everything is different again, and so we have to talk, and we will talk about prospects for peace in the Middle East in the context of the Abraham Accords, but not only in this context. Some days ago, I jokingly wrote to our distinguished guests that the newest version of our title should be From Hope to Uncertainty to Hope, but the uncertainty remains. However, I don't want to anticipate any conclusions. At the end of this evening, we will see which of both prevails. Sabine already made an introduction, but there were some few words more. I have the best possible guests to discuss this, and I am again proud to welcome Dr. Ebtesam El-Ketbi from the Emirates Policy Center in Abu Dhabi, a prominent think tank which she founded and presides over. And I should also mention that she was the first woman in the Arab world to head such an institution. I don't know if there are others in the meantime. And she ranks among the most influential Arab women. Dr. Ebtesam has a PhD from Cairo University. She is highly requested as an analyst and advisor and sits in innumerable institutions. There is so much to say about her activities, but you allow me to keep my introduction short. We need every minute. The same is with Dr. Abdulaziz. I welcome him. Also, he's the founder and chair of a famous institution, the Gulf Research Center. Sabine mentioned it already, a global think tank based in Saudi Arabia with a wide range of activities. And his PhD is from Lancaster, and he's sought after expert on Gulf politics and strategic issues. And joining us from Washington, D.C. is Barak Ravid, Israeli journalist, now living in the USA. You know him as a political reporter and Middle East analyst with Axios, and he writes also for Walla News in Israel. And I have to say, we have to be grateful, because also for many journalists, he's an almost daily source for many of us. Barak has incredible access and knows most of the actors in the Middle East personally. And speaking of valuable source, his book from 2022, even if written before the terrible events of October 7th and about a completely different Middle East, is still a valid and very thrilling documentation of the genesis of the Abraham Accords. I have schlepped it here, a very thick book. It's Trump Peace, the Abraham Accords and the Shaping of the Middle East. And it's including a chapter about a long interview and later telephone conversation Barak had with Donald Trump. At the time he was out of office, he was not president, which is truly enlightening regarding his relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. And by the way, also Dr. Ebtesam appears in the book, so you can see.
I didn't know, Barak.
So you can see I read it. Let me start with some facts. The Abraham Accords of 2020-21 are a series of normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states, brokered by the US under President Donald Trump during his first term. Sounds simple, but it was the first such diplomatic breakthrough since the Israeli-Jordanian peace agreement of 1994. So after more than a quarter of a century. And remember, I mean, 94 was in the midst of the Oslo process, of the Oslo Israeli-Palestinian process, so totally different circumstances. The first Arab state to take the step were the United Arab Emirates, joined by Bahrain. Later came Sudan and Morocco. As you well know, in the case of Sudan, the accession remained more or less declaratory. The country is suffering first a new coup and then sliding into a terrible, the most terrible war you can imagine, with a really terrible humanitarian crisis. The Abraham Accords have been Trump's project. However, after some hesitation in the beginning, also President Joe Biden tried and failed to include other states, and most important of all, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the holy grail of this diplomatic process, which is true until today, I think. The accords were a manifestation of a region or a generation of new Arab leaders, I have to say, determined to break the deadlock to the eternal status quo. And it pushed, as you know, a kind of reverse Middle East peace process. I mean, Israeli-Arab normalization first, and Israeli-Palestinian question suspended, on hold. Critics also said forgotten. As always the case with Trump, there were strongly transactional elements in the deal. I mean, this is what makes deals. And also this was criticized very much. And until today, we have discussions and quarrels about if it's enough to follow the business or if you need political visions first. Some things obviously were left open to interpretation, like one point which becomes highly controversial and relevant today, to make it easier for the United Arab Emirates to establish formal ties, which is really an emotional subject for the so-called Arab Street. Israel at the time reportedly backed down from plans to annex parts of the West Bank, which were enshrined in the Israeli government program of 2020. This is how Abu Dhabi saw it. Statements from Israel early on disputed that interpretation. However, the Emirates calls annexation a red line, also today, and I understand that such an Israeli step would even endanger the present agreement. We have basically two sets of questions to discuss here, and of course many other derive from there. First, the Abraham Accords proved resilient, but in which shape are they 5 years after the signing and 2 years after the start of the Gaza war, which perhaps is ended? Are they still a peace project or more a security and mere business framework? Are they politically frozen? Did Gaza re-politicize the normalization process between Israel and the Arab world? We know that polls in the Arab countries showed a shrinking support already in 22, so let alone today. And the second set of questions is, what is the relationship of the whole Arab-Abraham Accords complex to Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza now? I draw your attention to the fact that United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Morocco were not signatories in Sharm el-Sheikh. And you could also ask, why should they be? But why should Turkey and Qatar be, no? Which play a leading role in the whole Gaza process? So also Egypt does, but it has common borders. So I would first start with Barak and ask him for a short update and his evaluation of where we stand today. Secondly, Dr. Ebtesam will speak from the perspective of an Arab Abraham Accord state, and followed by Dr. Abdulaziz from Trump's Abraham Accords dream country, Saudi Arabia. Please, Barak, the floor is to you.
Thank you very much. It's great being here. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. You know, when shortly after the current Israeli government was elected, I remember I was invited to Abu Dhabi to participate in a conference about Israeli politics, and I met Dr. Ebtesam there, and Dr. Ebtesam said something during that conference that I will never forget, because it just, because it was, I mean, more than 3 years later, it was completely accurate, and two, because it said something to me about where the region is and where Israel is, and it was really very interesting, especially because everything that happened later. And Dr. Ebtesam spoke to one of the other Israeli speakers in that conference and said, listen, I mean, again, I'm paraphrasing here, we are here in the UAE, have been going through a process of many years of being more pluralistic and more open-minded and fighting extremist radicalism. And when we look at Israel, it seems that you're moving in the complete opposite direction. And this was even before the government was formed. This was a few days after the election. And I think that what we saw since then is exactly that the Israeli government, the current Israeli government that was formed at the end of 2022, has moved in a very radical and extremist direction. And you know, one of the things, my book came out in English shortly after they formed the new government. And one of the things I wrote in the conclusion chapter is that the Abraham Accords are not only a huge achievement, but they shouldn't be taken for granted, meaning it's not an irreversible process. And I wrote that one of my concerns was that the new government will take steps that could unravel the agreements. And I have to say that shortly after, this is exactly what they started doing, especially in the Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif, and we saw afterwards, you know, obviously what happened on October 7th and the renewed and the war in Gaza and the renewed discussion in Israel about annexation. And while the Abraham Accords survived all that, which I think shows, you know, their strength and their strategic meaning, because if you asked me before October 7th, okay, we're going to have a 2-year war in Gaza with tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians killed, and the Abraham Accords will be maintained, I would tell you, you know what, I'm not so sure. And I think they turned out to be much more resilient than I thought. Because, by the way, I think that for the leaders of the countries who were part of it, first and foremost, Mohammed bin Zayed, but also the king of Bahrain and the king of Morocco, it was, at the end of the day, it was a strategic step. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't some transactional thing. Okay, I'll do this now, I'll get this, and then I don't know, later down the road I'll change direction. No, it was something strategic, and this is why I think that the fact that the agreements are still here 3 years later, it means a lot. This does not mean that the status of the Abraham Accords is good. We're not in a good place at all. When you look at relations between Israel, the UAE, Israel, Morocco, Israel, Bahrain, those relations have taken a significant hit. And the biggest concern that I have, or that I've had in the last few months, and I think it's still a big concern, is that those peace agreements, which were very different than the agreements with Jordan and Egypt. It was a warm peace. It was peace not only between governments, but also between people. That this peace will cool down and will turn to be like the peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan. That's a big threat that is still there. And the second is that other countries that are not part of the Abraham Accords, mainly Saudi Arabia, will look and say, this is how it went for the Emiratis. Do we want to take the risk? And that everything that's been going on for the last 3 years could be a sort of a chilling effect for other countries to join. I have to say that from talking to Saudi officials, I still get the sense that Saudi Arabia is interested in moving towards normalization with Israel. I think the conditions for that are very clear, and I'm sure we'll hear later about it from our Saudi colleague. But I think that the willingness is still there under certain conditions, which to me still signals that there's a big opportunity. But the bottom line is, to me, that with the current government in Israel, which is the most radical right-wing government Israel has ever had, I think it's also, when you look at the government and its policies, I think it resembles, you can see some resemblance with what you see with some radical movements in the Arab and Muslim world, unfortunately. And this is why I think that under the current ruling government, I see very little chance of revival of the current accords, meaning I don't see, for example, I thought, for example, that Prime Minister Netanyahu would be invited to the UAE until now. It didn't happen, and it didn't happen for a reason. Okay, it was because of his policies, and I don't see those policies change. Therefore, I don't see a revival of the Abraham Accords from what it used to be under the current government, and I don't see an expansion of the Abraham Accords under this current government. This is why, at least in my analysis, there will have to be some sort of a political change that will lead to some kind of more moderate Israeli government that can take the steps needed in order to revive the Abraham Accords and expand it. I'll just close with one example. I'm sure at least some of you heard Israel's Minister of Finance, the ultra-nationalist and Jewish supremacist Minister of Finance, Mr. Smotrich, who said just a few days ago that, if it's about a path for Palestinian state, if this is the condition by Saudi Arabia, then no thanks, they can go back to ride camels in the desert. This is the Minister of Finance talking about Saudi Arabia that right now, at the moment, is holding one of the biggest economic conferences in the region ever. So I think it's just an example for how the Israeli government looks like these days, and why it will be very challenging, to say the least, to see any movement when they are still around.
Thank you very much, Barak. I give the floor to Dr. Ebtesam.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry, I have cough. My excuse. Barak, we don't feel shame that we are riding camel. We are riding camel, and also we are riding cars. We are riding planes now. So we can do everything at the same time. Smotrich, but he is ignorant. He doesn't know that also we can ride something else. I choose before talking about Abraham Accord that I should talk about. I took your advice that the prospect of peace in the Middle East in the light of Sharm el-Sheikh, or we'll call it Gaza deal, from hope to uncertainty. I think only days ago, many in our region spoke cautiously of a post-war horizon or for Gaza and the border pathway back to diplomacy. Today, that horizon has clouded. The two developments, both highly consensual, have sharpened the tension between hope and uncertainty. First, reporting indicates Washington is exploring controversial plan to divide Gaza into two zones, and an Israeli-controlled area that would be pressurized for reconstruction and aid, and another left under Hamas control with the assistance condition on disarmament. The idea is framed as a pragmatic ceasefire to recovery bridge, but it risks entrenching fragmentation and creating unequal politically charged geographies, relief and constructions. So Arab partners have already signaled deep reservation, fearing this would harden de facto separation, delay any political track that restores Palestinian agency and national unity. The second one also, Barak, you mentioned it in your tweets, that the Knesset preliminary votes on West Bank annexation bills, even if it's far from final, but are not a procedural footnote. They are a strategic accelerant with immediate diplomatic cost. And I think Trump himself, the US also, senior officials have warned that annexation would imperil the delicate ceasefire architecture and Gaza recovery concept now on the table. So, when you have hope that Gaza, we had, all of us, a hope that the war is ending. But if the grievance is there, how the war will end? I think what is, if this track gains momentum, it would rapporteur any remaining credibility of a negotiated and collapse international consensus behind stabilization and negotiation. And this this has immediate four risks. First, institutionalization of territorial fragmentation. A two-Gaza approach overlaid with annexation signaled in the West Bank entrenched geographic and political separation rather than sequencing step towards reunification and statehood. That dynamic would make governance, service delivery, and security reform vastly harder, not easier, including Abrahamic Accord itself. The second one is the collapse of a workable coalition for recovery. Regional and international actors whose funding, security guarantees, and diplomatic cover are essential. Those are unlikely to back a reconstruction model perceived to normalize occupation or sidestep Palestinian representation. Without them, even the rebuild first, which is the zones, will lack legitimacy, financing, and protection. The third risk is the escalation potential in the West Bank. If you remember Ravid, at that time when we met, I analyzed the Israeli election. And I said, if those between 17 and 25 elected this government, what does it mean? Those are the youth of, those are the Israeli youth whom they choose this extremist government. So governments, peace, need two to dance. And in Israel still now, they are not believing. Smotrich and Saer was last week, we were in Naples, and in a conference he said, I don't think anything will be changed after Gaza deal. So the last risk is policy incoherence among key sponsors. When US principals publicly criticize annexation while entertaining a Gaza partition logic, it creates mixed incentive for local actors, invites spoiler, and undermine the credibility of any framework presented as transitional. And then you can let the others whom they spoiled the Abrahamic Accord in the beginning, you give them an invitation to come back and do what they want to do. Now I move to Abrahamic Accord. The 2020 Abrahamic Accords mark at that time a historical shift by bringing about the normalization of relation between Israel and the signatories from the Arab world. In 3 years following their signing, the Abrahamic Accords offered a framework for cooperation across Middle East, the Gulf, the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean. They were considered success for US foreign policy. But prior to Hamas attack of 7th October 2023 and the ensuing Gaza war, the Abrahamic Accord were increasingly reshaping the region's political landscape. And you were right, Barak. It wasn't a tactical move, the signing. It was strategic, at least from UAE perspective. It was strategic because UAE model of development doesn't work, and all the Gulfs doesn't work if this region in turmoil or between crisis and wars. So, but now, or today, the war and the rising regional instability caused by the Israeli retaliation against Hamas killing over 60,000 Palestinians, from children, from women, whom they were innocent. They didn't do anything. This is put a major power to the continued success of the Abrahamic Accord. So now there is a growing concern that the region may drift towards a cold peace, as you were comparing between the one Egypt and Jordan signed and the Abrahamic Accord. That will be characterized by limited public support and growing disappointment with the accords. For example, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia inclusion in the Abrahamic Accord has been delayed because of the regional instability and unresolved Palestinian concern. And my colleague here from Saudi, I'm not going to speak about Saudi. He can explain better than me if they are going to sign Abrahamic Accord or they want another agreement to sign. So recent destabilizing events such as the Israeli airstrike in Doha in September may also complicate US efforts to expand the accords to additional Gulf states. while geopolitics has significant impact on the future of the Abrahamic Accords at the expense of geoeconomics. We know that it was the IMEC, Indian, Middle East, Europe corridor was supposed to start from India into Europe. That was because of the Gaza war has been stopped. And if this war is continuing, so Israel is also losing, because that was part of integrating Israel in the region. From UAE perspective, the war has inflicted considerable damage on the Abrahamic Accords, shifting the focus back to unresolved Palestinian issue. With the conclusion of the war, there is a greater opportunity to address numerous challenging issues, leading to a positive outcome in terms of reviving and broadening the Abrahamic Accords. The Palestinians also deserve an independent and secure state, and there is no alternative to this goal despite the challenges. Nobody will sign a peace or join Abrahamic Accord if this government, Smotrich, Saer, Ben Gvir is there. Nobody is willing to join from the Arab world. I will conclude by saying peace remains possible, but only if we resist the gravitational pull of fragmentation. A plan that split Gaza while the Knesset tests annexation in the West Bank does not lead to a horizon. It leads to a maze. Our task is to realign humanitarian urgency, political logic, and regional leverage towards one exit: a coherent territorial settlements, legitimate Palestinian governments, and enforceable security guarantee for all. That is how we move from hope through uncertainty back to hope again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ebtesam, for the, really very, very strong words and very clear words. Also shocking to think that more or less, if they do what you seem to fear they do, this pragmatic ceasefire in the direction of fragmentation, which is not only temporary but an idea. It's just the 20 points plan not fulfilled. It's trapped. It's not what's written there. But I give the floor to Dr. Abdulaziz, please.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Barak. So pleased to be in the beautiful city that I love, Vienna. And I was telling Ambassador Sabina that first time I was here was early 1981, and I still come back. So let me start by reminding everybody of the 14 pillars of Woodrow Wilson. One of it was the self-determination. And let me remind people with 181 UN resolution, November 1947, which was a result of a committee to study the two issues. One, the one state with Palestinian and Israeli living in it, or a two-state solution. At that time, the two-state solution was divided by 57.5% for the Israeli, 45 point something for the Arabs, and then the other part remains for the holy places, the mosque and the church and so on. We were told at that time, the Arab country, by the British, because it was prepared by the British. And the British told us, eventually after 30 years, we discovered this secret story. The British told us, don't vote for it. Don't accept it, because you may get a better deal. So the Arab decided not to vote for it. And the British themselves did not attend that vote. So it was a deliberate policy by the British. That was the basis of the establishment of the Israeli state in 1948. Now, we went into war, we went into many things. When the 7th of October happened, I met with some French diplomat, and I just expressed my feeling. The French diplomat somehow decided to send it to the Élysée, to the Foreign Office, and then it was leaked to the Le Monde, the French newspaper. But what did I say in that paper? I said something very simple. I stated what the Israeli want and what the Palestinian want. What the Israeli want, they immediately want the release of the prisoner. They want a friendly administration in Gaza that they can deal with, and not Hamas, not a militant. They want the militant group to leave Gaza, not to be there. And they want the handover of their weapon system. What does Hamas want? Hamas want three things, at least. They want the release, they want an immediate ceasefire. They want the release of their prisoner, more than 10,000 they've had there. And they want the reconstruction of Gaza. And they want to be able to work the administration. But I say to be able to achieve both sides want, there are three things we need to do. One, we have to find an exit strategy for the militant group. And the only country I could have thought of where this militant group can go to, and I'm talking here November 2023, just a month after the war, or a month and a half after the war, I said Algeria. And the reason why I said Algeria, because Algeria have recognized Hamas. Algeria had a strong relation to Iran, which partially support Hamas and al-Jihad. I said also they have a good relation to Qatar, because still some of the administration from Hamas are still based in Qatar. And they have a good relation to Russia, and Russia have a different position towards. So I said Algeria, and they have a strong military. They can protect them, put them in a camp and protect them. But also I said Abu Mazen cannot, the Palestinian Authority president, cannot continue alone to be in charge of all the Palestine. So maybe we need to think of something different. Maybe we need to think of a presidential council, consist of people from the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, not Hamas and Jihad, because I was very clear. I said, if they are a member of Hamas and Jihad, the US will object that because they are on the list, in the terrorist list. But they can find some people close to them, understand them, can represent their interest. With this way, and then we need the third thing, we need a peace force. In those peace force, we can look into the country that they have normalized with Israel, that they could be part of that one. And those countries, of course, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Egypt, Jordan, all those countries that they have normalized. I don't know, I think I did receive a big fire back because somehow the Le Monde tried to present it as it was the Saudi-French government. And by the way, here I speak about myself. This is my personal view. It has nothing to do with any government, so I reflect what I think. And as a researcher, I feel always at a bigger advantage that I can speak my mind and I can think the way how you see. Saudi Arabia started the first initiative with regard to the Palestine resolve their problem in 1982, not today. And then it was followed by 2002, the Arab Peace Initiative that was in Lebanon. It was a Saudi, and then it became an Arab Peace Initiative at that time. But unfortunately, the Israeli never made it possible for Yasser Arafat to leave Palestine and to attend that meeting or to do. I always remember what Richard Nixon said. He said, Israel live in a lake of hatred. They need to resolve their problem with their neighbor if they want to live in that region. And I think still that is something quite interesting, for, somebody old enough like Kissinger with all, with President Nixon, with all his experience. It was Nixon who said it, not Kissinger. So where are we today? I think we are in a very, Saudi did not object, by the way, or said anything negative about the Abraham Accords. They said any country who want to be part of that one, it's their sovereign decision and it's their right. They can do anything, whether they are a Gulf country or none. Because also on the OIC, on the Organization of Islamic Country, 35 countries out of the 57, they do have a normalized relation with Israel. So, that's nothing that we can object or we can say anything toward that. But Saudi said, if you want to normalize with Israel, we do have our precondition. And that precondition basically to say having a viable Palestinian state. If there is a viable Palestinian state, I am sure Saudi will not resist. And I think it was very clear also from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia in his Fox News interview. There was 3 issues with the US, and by the way, he's going to Washington on the 18th of November, so there is a preparation now for his visit there. I think he said we have 3 issues with the US. One is the what we call the security-backed agreement, and I will mention something more about that because it's important to understand how do we see our security and how do they look at their security. Second, the SMART, which is the small medium reactor, since Saudi Arabia going to be a big investor on the artificial intelligence and data center. Data center require a very powerful supply and reliable source, nothing better than the nuclear, and the small medium reactor is the source for supply for that one. But the US is saying, if you want to have the SMART, then you have to agree to sign the 123 agreement. 123, it means zero enrichment. You have no right to enrich any uranium. And Saudi said, no, we are a signatory to the NBT, so why do we have to give up our right if we are a signatory to the NBT, to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which gives us the right up to 5% to do. On the security side, I think Saudi aims and wish they wanted to have the same status of South Korea and Japan. But that's a very difficult one to achieve. I think what we have seen implemented so far is the Bahrain agreement, which was based on the Abraham Accord, but it's more of a consultative, really, rather than a security-backed agreement. The second, after the Israeli attack on Doha, we have seen the American-Qatari agreement, and that's basically an executive order with the beautiful black pen of Donald Trump, signing with the TC. It's good for as long as he's in position, but it's nothing behind that. And I don't think that's what the Saudi aims for, or understanding of regional security. Traditionally, since the twin pillars was during the Soviet Union time. We had the twin pillar policy, which is the Gulf country in support of the US vis-a-vis the Soviet Union expansion to the war motor and so, but anyhow, and Iran with us at that time. And then we went into Qatar doctrine after the Shah have left, and then we went to the single containment, dual containment, intervention, all of those series. I have a beautiful timeline of all the Gulf security, all the ideas and so on. But today, what was, until the attack on Qatar, I think it was very clear for us that we have our capability plus the US primarily, plus the other country whom they have a friendly relation from the Western side, i.e. Britain, France, to a large extent, also. But still, the main one was the United States, because they do exist in a land forces base in Kuwait. They do exist in Bahrain with the 5th Fleet, and they do exist in Udeid with the Air Force base, which left Saudi Arabia and then went to Udeid there. But when the attack took place, I think there was several issues. One, the Israeli is part of the CENTCOM, so the American cannot say we have not seen it, because the Israeli are with you in the same command room. But whether they decided to inform or not to inform, whether they thought this will be a successful or non-successful attack, I think there was many stories about that one, and time will explain more detail. But for us, we never bought the story in the region that the US, they were not aware and they were just informed a few minutes before. After the attack, I think nobody buys that story. But at the same time, that raises the big question. This is our strongest partner since the 40s in the region. Can we rely on that? Or do we have to remember the unreliability of the US position that started from Obama time when he said red line in Syria, and that red line have resulted to allow the Russian to be back to Syria in big time and have signed for 2 bases that they exist in it and so. Is it Trump when he was in power, when he allowed the Houthi to attack Saudi Arabia and also the UAE later, but also the critical oil facility in 2018 in September without responding? Is it Trump who decided not to respond to the Iranian attack of the drone that says it entered into the Iranian airspace? So the question of credibility, reliability, taking things for granted is no longer there. I think there is a big question there. At the same time, make no mistake, we don't believe Russia and China is the answer for that. Because with Russia, they're too busy with themselves, and a lot of weapon system that they have or they wanted to sell was never really proven to be a good system. And second, historically, we had our deepest relation with the West. I mean, at least from this country, we have 3,000 armored vehicles for our National Guard and for our so at least we know what we are buying, you see, when it comes to the quality and so. So the U.S. reliability and providing, yes, they used to say we are the best in boots on the ground. Yes, we did believe that in 1990 when Iraq invaded Kuwait. We did believe that in certain time when we saw their role there. But to go back from this security architecture in the region that raises the big question after the Israeli attack in Qatar, we come back to is Saudi today willing to normalize with Israel? I think they made it clearly. In principle, they don't mind it. They just want to say, we need to see a viable state. When we adopted and when we pushed with the French on the 22nd of September in New York, the notion of the two-state solution, and we have been able to get a lot of country to recognize. Honestly, to tell you the truth, for somebody who loves this country, we were so surprised to see the Austrian negativity when it comes to that issue. Maybe they have their own decision, their own political party, is their sovereign decision. Nobody interfered in that issue. But we thought countries like Spain, Slovenia, Ireland, Belgium, all those countries that they have accepted. We're not saying, the notion of two-state solution will probably will go back to the 1947, as I said in the beginning. And it's not today a new invention. But that at least will provide the things. Again, you heard it very well on the UN on the 22nd, the Palestinian head of authority saying no armament with Hamas, no possibility for Hamas to rule. All of the issues that it was demand and a prerequisite has been reconfirmed by the Palestinian Authority. And the big question today, is it Netanyahu because of his legal issue? Is it because of the extreme right they wanted to continue in that one? Have they been able to kill all the 2.2 million, in Gaza? Maybe they killed 65,000, they injured 170, 10,000 are losing. Yes, but still, there's 1.5 million at least there. So they cannot kill them all. And the Palestinian and Hamas who used to say, and the Iranian who used to say, we will wipe out Israel, they cannot do it. So it means both they have to live together. What sort of formula that they can live together with it? Our understanding, if it wasn't the endless support by the US, whether it's political or military, or even supplying all the necessary ammunition, to the Israeli, they would not have been able to expand their regional, war in that one, because they entered into Syria, they went into Lebanon, they went into expanding, they went into the Houthi, attacking. We don't blame them for attacking the Houthi, but we wish that their attack on the Houthi focus on the military side and not on the infrastructure that really harm the nation and make it worse in terms of humanitarian. Okay, I think I'll close it by saying, accept the two-state solution. and then you will normalize with Saudi Arabia. And that's the whole issue. But then we need to see a viable state. That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Abdulaziz, don't think I want to stop you talking about Austrian politics only. Thank you very much.
If you love the country, then you have to say how you feel. And I truly, genuinely, I love it and I like it. And I've been here, as I said, all these years. Today they told me at the Sakha Hotel that I'm still back again. So since 1981, I'm back again to the same place. So it means I like it and I love the people and I like the people. And I think I should speak, how do I feel? Yes?
We are happy to hear you. I found it also very interesting that you said it needs a viable Palestinian state, because there was always some confusion between a viable Palestinian state or an irreversible process.
Well, the irreversible process means you start today recognize the issue of the two-state solution, but you don't change tomorrow. You work on the detail, on the geography, on the political regime, on the security officer that they could be there. Saudi did endorse training 10,000 security Palestinian from the Palestinian Authority and newly recruited to be in Gaza, you know, to provide local policing and security. But we never said we need to arm them, you know, with the long-range missiles and so on there.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to ask Barak Ravid, because both of you mentioned the Israeli attack on Qatar on the 9th of September, and it was really amazing, and also the impression is, and many said it, I think also even Jared Kushner and Witkoff in an interview, that kind of also changed the setting and also enabled this process, which, yeah, we have or don't have. And I wanted to ask Barak about the US foreign policy, because it was disputed here if nobody believes the story that the United States were not informed. How do you see it? And could you also say something, I mean, regarding this double face of US policies? If yes, now Trump says no annexation, Israel will not do anything in the West Bank, and then, but he would never say, okay, two-state solution or something. What does he want? Sorry, this is a difficult question.
So first on the Qatar attack, just, you know, I'll just say the facts that I know, and this is from talking to, I think, quite a lot of people on both in both Israel, Qatar, and the US. Prime Minister Netanyahu informed President Trump of the planned strike around 45 minutes before the missiles hit the target. There is a question, though, how detailed was this notification? And I still don't have an answer to this question. If you'll ask US officials, they will deny that this notification took place. But if you ask more, they will tell you that during that phone call, Netanyahu did not make clear to the president what exactly is going to happen. And that and the way that this phone call took place was, I think, in a sort of disorganized manner that led to the fact that the protocol today in the White House about phone calls between foreign leaders and President Trump, this protocol has changed since the 9th of September, changed significantly even. And I think that if there were, if the call would take place in a different setting, I'm not sure that the strike would have happened. And so President Trump did get some sort of notification, but I think anybody else in the Trump administration did not know about the strike until very, very close to when the missiles hit. And I think, hopefully, I think we will know more about this, about everything that happened on this day later on. But while there was some sort of notification, I'm not sure that, there was no consultation. And if there was consultation, I don't think this strike would have taken place. And we all saw what happened afterwards, when this failed strike, is what led to the Gaza deal. Because the amount of pressure by the Gulf countries, not only Qatar, I think the entire GCC, the pressure on the US, and the pressure by the US on Israel, as a result, is what led to the end of the war. And I think what I heard from not only Qatari officials, but also Emirati officials and Saudi officials, is that while I don't think in the Gulf, I don't think a lot of people, cared necessarily about Hamas leaders being killed, but they did care about Israel violating the basic security architecture in the Gulf, which talks about the Gulf, the GCC, not being a field for other countries or other powers in the region to hold their battles in. And I think that the Gulf countries saw what Israel did as something that harmed in a very profound way their security architecture, and this is why the response was so hard, not only with Israel directly, but with the Trump administration. I think the Trump administration understood that and took action, and this is what led to the end of the Gaza war. On annexation, I think there's a lot of similarities, because the United Arab Emirates, once this discourse about annexation came up again, made it very clear, both to Israel and to the Trump administration, that if annexation takes place, then this is a red line, and it will undermine the Abraham Accords, undermine the Israel-UAE peace treaty, and will be a chilling effect for the entire region. And I think, by the way, President Trump did not need a lot of convincing. I think that for some time he was just not aware that these discussions have been taking place in Israel, inside the Israeli system. And once he heard about it, very, very quickly and very clearly he said, I'm not going to let it happen. And he told this to the group of 8 Arab and Muslim countries that when he met them on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, and he said it publicly to US reporters, and he said it since then several times. And I heard it from him directly. When we spoke, 2 weeks ago, that he will never allow Israel, as long as he's president, he will not allow Israel to annex parts of the West Bank. And I believe him, because I think he profoundly understands that this would hijack his entire agenda in the region. And Trump's agenda in the region is, after ending the war in Gaza, is to move forward with expanding the Abraham Accords, getting a Saudi-Israeli peace deal, getting a Syrian-Israeli peace deal, getting maybe a Lebanese-Israeli peace deal, getting big Muslim countries to join post an Israeli-Saudi deal, countries like Indonesia, for example. That's his vision for the region. So anything that will stand in the way of this vision, will just not happen. And I have no doubts about it.
Thank you very much. I mean, I invite you also to respond if you want to add something somebody else said. May I ask you now, because Barak said, I mean, red line, United Arab Emirates, and made it clear, and it would undermine peace. You said it could become a cold peace. But what does red line mean? I mean, what is your idea? I know you cannot speak for anyone. I mean, but what do you think? What means it? What does it mean? What will the Emirates do?
No, we'll freeze the Abrahamic Accord at least.
But what's freezing?
Freezing, it means no. I mean, we reached in a moment during Gaza war that our ambassador brought back. Look, our leaders doesn't go, although we signed with Netanyahu, but because Netanyahu is like Trump, unpredictable guy. And he give you promises, then he does something else. So that trust is not there between two sides. It will freeze the Abraham, it will not exit the Abrahamic Accord. It will freeze it until another government might be more cooperative with them. But also, I heard it from a Saudi official that the Saudi changed their reading for after Doha attack, that now, Barak, that Israel is now the first threat for them. It's not Iran, it's Israel now. And this is also, it was a shock for all Gulfists that also Israel is not anymore can be trusted as a guarantor for their, or to cooperate in security. That's why I am saying, and I said that before, I remember in Herzliya, it was before the war. Before the war, only May 2003, that if this government stays, it will cause more violence and instability in the region. And here where we are today, it's unstable. Still, you also don't forget Syria. You don't forget Lebanon. And it's not about Gaza also. So you see a government announcing the big Middle East. So that's what makes the Arabs also fearing what is inside those staying in Tel Aviv, and what kind of a trust can be created between both sides. So that's what I'm saying. With this government, nothing will move on. I would say, look, we did not stop dealing with Israel. Maybe the main advantage of that deal during the war, that we are the only one could bring the aids to the humanitarian aids to the Gazan. That was, none could do it. But today also you still have the Israeli troops preventing the humanitarian aids to go there. So that's what makes me also, we had hope, but I'm uncertain. Where is this deal will go? Sometimes I'm thinking that Netanyahu is buying time because of Trump pressure, and he is planning for something else. So to move the Abrahamic Accords, to enlarge the Abrahamic Accords, to get, and I warned that time also, nobody is going to join the club if the violence is continuing. And you mentioned Haram al-Sharif. Every day Smotrich is going to Masjid al-Aqsa. Look, I mean, the signatories cannot separate themselves from the Arab, cannot separate themselves from the Muslim. They are also part of that. But if those, they are continuing and there is no accountability, and you know Netanyahu, he will still go from war to war to keep himself in the power. This is what we are saying. I think he's going to launch another war against Iran to keep himself in power. Yes, I don't think he is having genuine, really wish to end the war. He is the one who spoiled Oslo. You want him to create another Oslo? That is would keep me. I'm not pessimistic, but I belong to the realpolitik. This is what is on the ground, and from there you can predict what will take us to which future.
Dr. Abdulaziz, do you want to add something, or let's go to the immediately to the question, because we're yes.